So when I do the work, it's coming from a whole nother level of passion and commitment. I truly feel like the work that I've done within the communities of Houston, you know, learning the skills to articulate yourself when you have certain issues, knowing how to address trauma that you never dealt with before, having certain particular conversations with people that are difficult to have conversations with, but finding a medium to be able to do that. These are what the restorative practices that have helped me do.
All right, so the other day I was watching the game between the Lakers and the Clippers, and I noticed the effortlessness of Kawhi Leonard and the way he was able to implement himself straight into the game with the new team, new system, and it seemed like he was there for years and he just started with his team. And the purpose of today's podcast is talking about education and the Kawhi Leonard effect, whereas teachers thrive and educators thrive and think about trying to implement themselves into a new system as smoothly and as easily as Kawhi Leonard does on each team that he was a part of with the Spurs. He won a championship with the Spurs, with the Raptors, and now he's seemingly looking like he's going to do great things with the Clippers. And on each team, he was able to implement himself into the system and have a smooth transition and become the leader of each team. So I believe the Kawhi Leonard effect is what a lot of educators, new and old, experience when they're trying to get into schools and have impact and have true leadership with students and other administrators and teachers as well. So we wanted to start the podcast with that, give a little look on that, and the whole purpose of the podcast today, episode 7, will be about what makes a good educator. All right, and the biases that we all have as educators, whether good or bad, what those look like, how to identify them, and why is it important to identify them and address them so that you could be a better educator. So, very special episode today. We have our second guest, first in-person guest. He is a writer, an educator, a former high school championship level coach, TSU alumni, and a good friend of mine, Tristan Jones. Welcome, man.
What's going on? What's good? I'm happy to be here.
Yes. So the way I met Tristan, Mr. Jones, for my students that are watching, we actually taught at Kip Houston High School last year, and I met Tristan there for the first time. Never met him before, and what I experienced, I actually taught one course called the Restorative Justice Council, which I talked about in previous episodes, in his classroom. And while in his classroom, I had to set up before, so I would experience his classes beforehand, and then he would sit in on my classes and experience my class and what it looks like, and actually help out with conversations and dialogue with my students. And I got to see the type of impact that he had with the students immediately and what he brought to the table. He built real relationships with students. The trust factor was there for sure. And his techniques and his way of being in the classroom just was on a whole nother level of good. And I thought it would be good to bring him on and talk about what makes him, what it takes to become a good educator, his perspective on it. And so the first question I want to ask you, Tristan, what inspired you, or who inspired you to get into education in the first place?
Man, it really just comes from childhood. Like, I think about myself as a kid. I was one of those, like, know-it-all kids, like, you know, who knew every roster in the NBA, every roster in baseball, every roster in football. So you have like these sports debates, and I was always the one. I would just kind of sit back and then kind of input with like all this knowledge that nobody cared about. So it's like, what else would there be for me, you know, who reads a lot and who knows a lot of stuff that a lot of people don't care about, like, and, you know, I always like teaching people things.
Yeah.
You know, if I knew something and somebody didn't know it, then I love like just sitting down and kind of going through like the minutia of this is how it's done, modeling, all these things. So it's kind of, it really was super natural for me. I grew up in an educational household with nurses, with books everywhere. So it never seemed out of the ordinary for me.
Yeah. Gotcha. Well, I know we had conversations when we were on campus, and I remember the passion was really there, where you were all about the education and getting to the kids and helping them out, which I really appreciated, being on campus with you and then sharing a classroom with you and seeing it in action and actually seeing the relationships build over time with you and a lot of your students. I know for me, when it comes to, I had 9 years of experience being in education, and within that time, I know I had a huge learning curve, and for me, I think it hit me when I had to let go, right, of all the image of what a teacher is, or what I was taught to be when I was in college, right, or at the beginning stages of my educational career. Once I started to let go of that image and just start to be me, it became easier for me to be in the classroom and really dive in and try to connect with students or whatever. Do you have an experience when that hit you, where you either had that moment where things clicked and you felt like you want to do this because it's on another level and you feel like you could do it long term?
I would say my first year.
Okay.
I've been like super lucky. I came in, I taught in HISD at Barbara Jordan High School in Trinity Garden / Fifth Ward. And I just had this group of kids who, it was exciting to come to work. Even though I didn't know what the hell I was doing the first year. Literally, I had no idea. What I did have was, I had content knowledge and I had just the ability to build relationships. Gotcha. And like those two things can carry you a long way until you actually learn what the hell you are doing. But my first year, just able to build relationships, and students kind of stick to you. So I'll tell you, it was one story. During my first year, we had like a study hall. Gotcha. So every kid would go to study hall like right after, I want to say third period, whatever. So I'd have all these kids in a room, and I had a lot of kids who really weren't even supposed to be there, but they just came in there like just to sit down and talk. And they would ask me about like life experiences, college, relationships, just give advice, outside of the content. And one girl, like one of my favorite students ever, she just kind of sat and she was like, "Hey, do you see like all these kids around you? Like they're here for you. Like they're not just here to hang out, whatever. Like they're here for you. Like, do you see the effect that you're having?" And it hit me. I was like, shit, I guess so. And it let me know that as important as the content knowledge is, like them learning how to write, learn how to read, close read, blah, 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 the thing that they'll remember forever is like how you made them feel in that 50-minute block over the course of 9 to 10 months. So that was my aha moment. Like, okay, this is what I'm here for. Yeah.
And I mean, and it was when last year was how many years was that?
Last year was my 6-year teaching.
6-year teaching. And I can attest to being in the classroom and witnessing that myself, where I was, and even being in, where Tristan would sit in the back and watch me teach my honor council class, Restorative Justice Council class, where we would do a lot of that reflection and get to know another level and building relationships. And you implemented yourself seamlessly into that environment, and you built relationships with my students as well, which is very neat to see, and not feeling like giving another person that the kids could get to, because my mission was to create that. Because I think the biggest education not only comes from the content, right? It's about connecting the dots, right? And the whole translate and success thing, that's what it all comes about, right?
Absolutely.
Being able to translate it from what your personal experiences are to give meaning to what you're learning, and then it builds like the knowledge even more on another level to help memory and all that. So it was just good to see that my class, I was working on that specific, I was focusing on that area of building those skills, and then you teaching ELA, seeing that in that classroom as well, where I will walk in, I'll see this similar practices being done with the students and building relationships, which is pretty neat. So I enjoyed watching that. And I know Dre does a lot of work with students on what I did being in the classroom and building those other skills so that kids could be implemented in the class as well. So it's pretty neat to see the both of you guys being able to do that in different environments that, well, I was brought in as a restorative justice coordinator. So I was specifically brought in there to do that, where you guys are doing it in a classroom. I know Dre does special education and you do ELA, and being able to implement that in those relationships and that reflection piece, which is very powerful and impactful.
You know where a lot of that comes from? I'm from the hood. You know what I'm saying? And I don't say that as like, it's not a bragging thing, but like the hood, like the universal hood is like this social experiment where you just learn how to interact with people. And I was a reserved, quiet kid. I was like, all my friends and family members, everybody was louder than me, so I had to like sit back and observe. And you have to learn how to navigate in different spaces, different people. So that was a life experience for me that helped me, so I can go in any classroom. Like I do it now, like that. People ask me cover a class. I walk in the classroom, I look and I see who's there. Oh, it's freshmen. Okay, let me adjust how I reach them for the time period that I'm here. So it's like my life experiences taught me how to navigate in different spaces with different types of people. I was always a shy kid. I wouldn't say shy, but more reserved. So I would just sit back and watch. It's like, okay, so this is how we moving. Okay, so let me, I don't want to say code switch, but just let me tap into this other skill that I have. Sometimes it involves just sitting down and just shutting the fuck up. And sometimes I might need to be the more aggressive, abrasive one. It just depends on who's there. So what you said, like just me coming to your class, like I was just able to sit back and watch and like, okay, and I learned so much about those kids just from listening. So when I interjected, it wasn't from a place of like ignorance. It's like, okay, I just listened to you talk about your life story for 2 weeks. I didn't say a word, and then I came over and now I know how to interact with you. So it's authentic and it's genuine.
And I think that's very important for all educators across the board, because I think when you're entering education, right, you think, and I know you guys have seen this too, where educators come in and they think just having the title of a teacher, you're supposed to demand this certain type of level of respect or understanding from students, right? And it is a big part to do with building those relationships, actually learning, putting yourself in those kids' shoes, or at least hearing their stories and kind of connecting the dots for yourself so that you can implement yourself into their lives, right? So that you could connect the dots help them connect their dots, right? As educators. And I think that is huge, especially with your personal experience. Me, I come from, you could say a rough environment as well. But for me, it was different. I didn't have the Kawhi Leonard effect coming in first year and being able to implement myself immediately. And it was because of this. And this is very key. And I think you, what it shows from what you're articulating now, you're very self-aware from a very young age, right? And I think building that self-awareness is very key for all educators to do within themselves. For me, my first couple of years, I had to address that I was very self-centered, right? And I was very more focused about me and how I looked, and then the image that I would try to portray as a teacher to demand certain respect, right? And from my personal experience, to be completely vulnerable and transparent, like I said before in previous episodes, I was building up this armor to look a certain way so people wouldn't mess with me. So people, being the oldest sibling of my brother and sister, right? I had to develop this armor of like being able to defend myself and my siblings so no one will mess with us, right? And that kind of had an effect on me that led on into my educational career, right? And that, me identifying that and getting to a place like, oh, okay, I need to break that, allowed me to sit down and listen to kids and to actually be there with kids and not actually like talk at them, but talk with them. And that was very key for me as an educator. For my program that I'm trying to develop with my curriculum, my mission is to kind of like bring that to the forefront. the training in students and teachers, not just students, training in teachers to identify those biases that you may have from your personal experience. Those that like I said, for me, I had to realize that self-actualization in yourself, right? So that you can become a better, not only educator, but a better individual, right? And I think that's very, very, very key to continue. For you in education, because I know I asked you questions before, and this is something that you want to do. What is your mission long term, like how you look at it when it comes to like education? Because when I spoke to you, when I speak to most people, it's just like a stepping stone, right? They want to get certain places, but you are like, this is what I do. I enjoy doing this.
I'm an asshole know-it-all. I have no idea what else I would do, man. This is like the perfect job for me. I don't know. I get asked that a lot. I get asked that by I've had administration people in administration say that, you know, I would be good in administrator as an AP. I have no desire to do that. I would do it because I think there's different ways to affect change. But my immediate place is amongst the people, like general pop. Like it's my immediate place is amongst kids and touching them on like a emotional level on a daily basis. Like, you know, reaching them through content. Like I think it's important to have people tell kids that it's cool to read. You know what I'm saying? Like it's cool to like lose yourself into like literature and language and how these things affect us on a daily basis. Like you turn on the TV and you see how rhetoric and language is being used positively and negatively, mostly negatively. Like we need more people, and coming from a black man, like that's just a rare thing in education. I just enjoy it. You know what I'm saying? I enjoy talking to the kids and helping mold them to be better people, more so than I like talking to adults sometimes, you know what I'm saying? Because adults can have like this fixed mindset and, you know, kids theoretically are more, you know, on a growth mindset. So for me, my overall mission, thing I tell the kids on day one is I'm just really just here to make you smarter. You know, and that comes from sitting in this class, doing this work, but it also comes from, hey, some of these kids are going to try you, you know what I'm saying, on an intellectual thing, because that's just what they do. And I'm here to smack your hand and be like, nah, you can't do that because you're just not on that level. But I can help you get to that level to where you can challenge people intellectually, but this is how you do it. You know, so my goal is to make kids smarter. My goal is also I firmly believe that every kid needs about 3 to 5 people who are just firmly in their corner.
Agreed.
They're like, hey, I got you. You know what I'm saying? You need a recommendation letter? I got you. Need a job reference? I got you. You need some shoes because you ain't got no shoes to hoop in. What size you wear? 11, I got you. Boom. People just need people in their corner, man. And I'm very comfortable in that role as just mentor, psychiatrist / you know, coach / whatever. So I'm cool where I am, and whatever happens to happen. But
I mean, that's amazing. And I think with schools, I know administrators being behind closed doors last year, working directly with the principal of the school and other administrators, trying to find that in hiring like teachers, right? How do you being that, right? How can you like identify that if you're trying to hire someone? Because I've seen people, I've done interviews for kids, and the person comes in, they know their content, they talk a good game when they come for the interview, it looks great, and then they get in the classroom, and within a couple of weeks, they're like, this is not for them. I'm
gone. That actually happened last year I was department chair. Okay. This year we did away with department chairs. So I sat in a number of interviews. And we would always huddle after and like, hey, what do you think? Blah, blah, blah. We had a few candidates come in, and again, they knew the content. We had one woman, she came in, again, she knew the content, but she was like in one spot. So she would not move. She was like Jay-Z. When you know Jay-Z concert, he stayed in one spot. You know, but she was in one spot, and to me that shows like she was afraid to like move about and like actually interact, because so much of teaching is like moving around, like just interacting, sitting down, like, hey, what's up? You know, cracking a joke here and there, or critiquing work, or hey, that's a great job, or just positive reinforcement. It's so much that goes into it. It's just, you're just moving. You know, I liken everything to sports. This is like on a court, on a field, you don't just stand, nobody stands in one spot. You know what I'm saying? Like you're always moving and interacting. So things like that show me like your comfort level with just different types of people. How well can you navigate with people who you just walk in a room? Number one, can you be a presence? Will people know that you're there when you walk in the room? When I close my door, stuff stops. You know what I'm saying? Because they know I'm here. At least 90% of that class is gonna stop whatever they're doing, because that's just the understanding. And yeah, can you just interact with people you've never met before in some type of way? So that tells me a lot about your life experiences. You know what I'm saying? Have you had to be in a position where you had to interact?
So when you're looking for candidates, you're more focused on their movement and interaction with, whether it's a demo or not, with students or administrators, the way they move around and interact is what you look for. Okay, I think that's good.
That's huge, man. Like the content knowledge gets buried on a day-to-day basis. Like the content knowledge is probably about 20% of my day. You know what I'm saying? And the most of it is just articulating it to people on different types of intellectual levels and abilities, and it's just dealing with the human portion of it. That's all it is. You're dealing with humans who have 8,000 other things to worry about, and you're trying to get them, hey, let's focus on this for 55 minutes and this, you know, so on and so forth. So I'm looking at how do you interact with people. If you can't interact with people, I'm sorry, like that, you're not my type of candidate. You know, regardless of your content knowledge, like go be a consultant or something like that. You know what I'm saying? But this educational work is dealing with people.
For sure. For sure. I agree with that. Now, I struggle too with witnessing that. I know there was this one candidate that came in last year at the beginning of the year. I was a part of the hiring process at Kippies High School, and they did a phenomenal job on even like presenting themselves and moving around the room. And I remember I was like, oh, we should, you know, she seems like the part, she knows the stuff and all that. But and then everybody else was opposed. They obviously had more experience of me doing it. And they saw something, right, that I didn't necessarily see. And I could see even the hardship behind that, because, you know, there's, especially in education, where a lot of educators and administrators leave on a constant basis. Whereas if you're new, you're going to end up having those slip-ups, like hiring someone just because you got the vibe the first time, right? And I think, you know what I mean, and I'm glad you brought that up, the interaction, the people skills, because for those who are getting into education, whether you're in college or you're thinking about it, or it's something that you're trying to get into another level, it's very important to know your content, for sure. It definitely helps you get through lessons by knowing the content, and when kids ask specific questions, being able to address it by knowing the content. But if you don't have the people skills, and if you haven't addressed certain things in your life, it is going to be extremely difficult. I mean, I've seen things happen in the classroom that will, you know, open your eyes to yourself. Kids will make you see yourself for who you are faster than anybody else, especially in schools. And if you haven't had practice at doing that stuff outside of the classroom, when you get in the classroom, it gets crazy, because say a kid addresses something that you haven't addressed in your life yet, right? Like an interaction, you feel uncomfortable addressing people and looking them in the eye, right? For example, right? And a kid is looking for that, right? And then the interaction continues, right? And then it becomes your position is high, so it becomes like, oh, you shouldn't talk to me like that. And you're not, and you can't see, normally that's a cry for help. But if you feeling threatened by that moment, you're not able to identify, okay, I need to, like, for example, something that I learned not from school, right? And when I was learning how to be an educator, is actually when I became an educator. You don't get louder when a kid is getting loud. You actually get lower, right? Remember who's the adult in the room. And if you feel like you're not getting that attention outside of school, you're going to search for that, especially in school. And I've seen that constantly.
3 things prepared me to be an educator. None of them were like school.
Yeah.
Number 1, growing up where I grew up, like seeing that what you just said, like when somebody gets louder, where I'm from, you get loud, we get loud, it's only gonna escalate. So you have to learn these tactics of like, how do I de-escalate situations? Because depending on where I am, depending on the neighborhood I am, depending on what court I'm playing on, depending on how somebody's feeling, like this could end up bad. You know what I'm saying? So you have to learn to de-escalate situations. Number 2, I was a father before I became a teacher. Like I graduated college in 2009. I didn't start teaching until 2013. Like in between that, I was working like at a bank. So what I had to learn working at a bank was just dealing with different type of people, different type of ages. 200 people would sit down at my desk, and I had to figure out, what do you need? How can I convince you that what you need is what you really want right now, even though you came to change your PIN number. You know, now I got your credit card because you need to build credit. Like, I have to have these conversations with you and not just say, well, they told me to sell this credit card. No, I have to talk to you and figure out what you need, where you're trying to go in life. This is education, you know, and it's just talking with people where you're trying to go. And then, so those 3 things, like where I grew up, being a father, and like working at a bank, learn, you know, all those situations like taught me how to deal with people on a day-to-day basis, different types of people from different walks of life. Being an educator is kind of like the result of all that, honestly. It's like, it prepared me so I never feel intimidated. Like there's nothing, you can't intimidate me.
Exactly.
You know, like something bad is gonna have to happen, but I can't be intimidated. Like I walk around, kids walk around, they see me. I don't have the luxury of like this really tough exterior. I look 18, you know, on certain days. Like I get a haircut, I look 17, you know what I'm saying? Like I've been stopped at schools that I worked at, like, where you going? Like, hey sir, I work here. You know what I'm saying? So I don't have that luxury. So with me, it's just being authentic me.
Yeah.
And life experiences has taught me, I know when a threat is there, like a real threat. So a kid having an attitude, that happens. Like I have a 14-year-old daughter now. Like your attitude means nothing to me. I tell the girls all the time, your attitude means literally nothing to me. My 14-year-old will burn a hole through my soul, you know what I'm saying, quicker than you can.
That's true.
You're gonna leave this class in about 10 minutes, and I'm gonna forget this ever happened. Like I gotta go home with that mother, you know what I'm saying? I learned how to deal with every situation because this life kind of forced it upon me. Yeah. Before I got into the profession, when I felt when I came in, I had the mental part down. Now it was like, how do I teach people the stuff that I know? That's the hard part.
And I think that's the difference. I got into education right out of it. I made a strategic plan. My mission was to be a professional basketball player. When things didn't go my way, I went to a school that their best degree was education. So I was like, why not get the best degree from the school that offers it? So when I get out of school, I'll get a job immediately. Right? I strategically planned that out. So I'm not really focusing on like, how am I actually going to do this? My mom is an educator. I used to go to school like, oh, my mom's really good because her purpose is to teach, right? And she comes from a household that nobody graduated high school, right? So for her to be a teacher, it was like on another level, right? So I didn't appreciate that when I was growing up. I would go to her school, I would see her do her thing, and kids respecting her, blah, blah. So I had this image, right? I didn't see the struggles, right? Because my mom was a master by the time I was entering her classes and seeing her.
You didn't see the struggle.
Exactly, exactly. So when I got into the classroom, I started young, and I've been saying this for a while. There has to be a way that we can get either an age or a certain experience that you need to have before you get into education, right? Or like somewhere that you can go, that you can like, or have this process of to be able to have certain life experiences, right? Because for me, I had to learn a lot of these things at school, right? Like addressing myself, like why am I acting, like seeing that exterior and be like, that's not me. Right. I'm more, if you see me, I'm more of a calm, relaxed, chill, laid back type of guy.
Right.
But I had to act as if I was this strong, quiet, tough guy that don't mess with me. Right? And addressing that sooner, it's because the job got easier when I let that go.
Right.
Right? Because I was able to be me, I was able to connect and just be able to build relationships. And like you said, the three things that you had for me, the couple things that were important for me was, number one, that I got addressed with, and actually also it was a combination of being in school and then being with my wife at the time, fiance. It's called empathy.
Oh yeah.
Right? Just having empathy. Like for me, I started out having sympathy. And that is a recipe for disaster. You don't go into a job saying, I'm going to save these kids.
You don't go
right?
in any situation.
You don't go any situation doing that. But you hear this a lot. I see teachers literally saying, I just want to help. And it's the savior complex, right? And I had it, right? And I had to address that. I'm coming in the wrong way. I naturally want to connect. I want to do this, but I'm not able to because the way I'm seeing it, right? So for me, it was having empathy, like being able to just shut up and listen, right? And then being able to not have an answer for everything, but just understand their stuff is difficult. And I have stuff that's difficult, but just because I went through difficult stuff doesn't mean that I understand fully what you're going through, right? And that's truly empathy, right? And then being able to say, how can I support you? Right? Not saying, okay, you need to do this. Right?
It's also intelligence. A big part of intelligence is saying that I don't know.
Yep.
You know, and that's the biggest lesson my kids learn. All my kids have been told for so long how smart they are.
Yeah.
And when they don't know something, it becomes like this imposter syndrome. It's like, I'm in this AP class and he just talked for like 10 minutes and I don't understand a word he just said. I'm afraid to say I don't know because I'm going to be found out by all these other kids who are thinking the exact same thing. You know what I'm saying? And like, you just go in these situations. Another thing that really helped me was just being married, having a kid. You know, I have, like, my son is 6 now. He was almost 1 when I started teaching. It's like training a puppy. Like, you just got to be consistent. You know what I'm saying? Like, consistency.
Yeah.
Like, again, I never had to prove how masculine I was.
Yeah.
And that's a luxury because I was with kids who I could have conversations with and they could see like the real authentic me and they just respected that. You know, like even like now, like I hear kids talk to other teachers and say how they're scared of me and I'm like, what? All I do is joke around, literally. Yeah. But being a father, I know when to snap back and like, hey, no, check this out. This is what we about to do and this is what we're not gonna do. Yeah. And get real serious. And like that, when they don't have a lot of consistency, then they respect the hell out of consistency when they get it.
Agreed. And I think this confidence, when you get to a certain level or a certain age of just living life, right? You build this confidence. For me, it was being able to just be consistent, like you said, because that was going to be my next one, empathy and then consistency, right? Consistent in who you really are. And then it's not only in the classroom. Like I was taking it home. Like how do I, make it where it goes together? How do I translate it, right? And I was getting hit. My wife, dealing with situations with my wife, communicating to her, and then having a daughter as well. When I had my daughter, it like changed everything because I'm like, I don't want to be able to talk a certain way to her, so I can't be talking like that. So it connected it faster, right? That's very important. I think consistency, and then also the last thing I was going to say, persistence. Oh, yeah. Right? Because you're going to have your ups and downs, and it's going to be extremely difficult some days, but you have to be able to stay the course.
How comfortable are you being a villain?
Yes.
That's fatherhood and that's education. How comfortable are you being a villain? Even if you're a villain for like 3 minutes.
Agreed.
You might be a villain for the whole day. Like, how comfortable are you with people being upset at you? And how can you persist and understand that, hey, they'll get over it because they'll understand eventually. This happens every single year. Like that, this is what's gonna happen, and you might not like it, but you'll understand at some point that it was for the best. If you're not comfortable being a villain, I would tell you don't have children, period, and don't be an educator. Because you're going to, even when the kids build you up as this, I'm like, you're my favorite teacher. I love you.
Yeah.
Oh my God, I love this class. I want to come every day. Like at some point, I'm going to piss you off because you're going to piss me off because I have high expectations and you're not meeting them. And at some point, I'm going to have to let you know these expectations you're not meeting. I wrote it in my lesson for tomorrow to tell each one of my classes that at certain points, y'all are not meeting my expectations. And my students this year are amazing.
Yeah.
But in order for them to be the full amazing that I know they can be, I'm gonna have to tell them tomorrow, hey, y'all just not cutting it in these particular areas. And you know what? Neither am I in certain areas. So we're gonna work on this together.
And you know what's crazy about that? Like I say this all the time. You should never go into education trying to be liked. You should never try to go in trying to be liked. That is another recipe for disaster.
Students, other teachers.
And the crazy thing is, the thing that I learned while I was even at KIP, right? Kids respect you more when you stand your ground. If you're able to do that switch, kids recognize real quick. Right, they can smell fake off of you from a mile away. Right, so if you're about that life, they know who can switch it on and off. Right, so kids are gonna test regardless, and you learn this as a father, a mother, right away. They're gonna test your limits just to see how far they can go, and it's not gonna be just one day and it stopped. My daughter didn't test me for a whole week till she said, "Okay, he's just not gonna let me do that." So I'm gonna just stop because it was consistent.
You tell a kid no, and you just stare them in their eyes while you telling them no. Like
most times that works.
All the time it works. Like the girl asked me today, like she, it was during the study hall, they can't go to the restroom, like just period. So she just watched. Mr. A whole big smile on her face. Mr. Like, I really have to go to such and such. Can I go? And I was like, no. There was no smile, and I just looked her dead in the face, like no. Yeah. And she laughed it off, like it was awkward. She laughed it off, and then she walked away, and she was cool. 5 minutes later, like so, you have to be able to tell people no, and you have to be able to mean it and not really give a damn what happens after that. Like my favorite line to kids is, "Nobody in here is gonna whoop my ass." Like, that's true. Not a single one of you is gonna whoop my ass.
That is true.
We're gonna deal with this disappointment and we're gonna move on.
Exactly. And it is not about like it's metaphorically. Like I think going in and setting up your mindset, like I say this all the time. I used to, when I was going through it and trying to build myself up, I used to look in the mirror before I go to school. It was like, ain't nobody effing with you. Like you're a grown man. Ain't no kid should get a reaction out of you. Right? Because I've had that happen and I had to build myself out of it. Like, how do I get out of it? And it's part of building that confidence. Like you said, a lot of people haven't addressed that thing in their life. They're not able to look at somebody in the eye comfortably without smiling or trying to be direct, without, getting and then messing up the respect level, right? They're not able to do it outside of school. You can't expect them to do it in school.
It's difficult because for a lot of people new to education, they look at it from they look at the relationship part, because the relationship part is important. It's one of the most, if not the most important thing. But what is that relationship built on? So if you come in and you understand, like, hey, I see these kids all the time. They're in my room all the time. They love being in my room all the time. How can I disappoint them? And if you come in there with that's a misconception that it's hard to break out of. Like I've gotten in that trap too. Like, damn, these kids really like me. Like, how can I tell her, hell no, you can't go to such and such, or you can't do such and such? And it just takes doing it and realize they respect that. And then everybody, and it's not really a kid thing. Kids are a microcosm of the world. Everybody respects when you tell them no. And you mean it. Everybody. They may not like it, they may complain, but if you firm with it, they get over it. And then
being consistent with that. Like, just because you said it on Wednesday doesn't mean he's not going to ask again on Thursday, Friday, right? Kids got short-term memory, especially in school, and you got to be consistent. They will remember that you're consistent.
And they're also dealing with other inconsistent people, and they know who the inconsistent teachers are. My God, they know, and they'll tell you, and they'll tell everybody who'll listen. And they just need people to hey, nah. You know what I'm saying? Or yes, hey, y'all. I have one class period, I think it was the third day of school, man. I came, I was asking some questions and could tell nobody really read the thing that they were supposed to read the night before. So I just kept asking, I'm probing. They just kept giving me the dumbest answers ever. And I just stopped and I'm like, These are the dumbest questions I've ever heard in my life. Like, y'all sound really stupid right now. You know what I'm saying? And I can tell they've never heard that before.
Yeah.
And it's like, this is something y'all gonna have to get used to. When you do something great, I promise I'll tell you when you do something great. When you do something trash, I have to let you know that it's trash. So like that, those type of things they respect. They didn't back down from that. The next day they were better.
Yeah.
And I told them like, yeah, hey, y'all better. And
one thing I learned that being a husband.
Oh yeah.
Right? Like having to put your ego at the door and be able to say what you're comfortable with, what you're okay with, and what you're not okay with, and being able to give praise and correction at any point, right? You get that's a life experience, right? And most people, and some people that are in education don't get that life experience before they get in there. So it's difficult to do that, especially with kids that are younger than you, because and then pride and ego gets in the way. And I think for me, I saw that quickly. Once I got with my wife and fiance at the time, and then built into my wife, I had that experience that I had to address, right? And for with Dre, I know Dre. I seen Dre at the high school level, middle school level, and now I know he's doing elementary. What Dre for you? What's the biggest difference when dealing with? Because I know you do a lot of the relationship building and working on those skills of communication and everything. For you, what were the differences in the communication with the high school and middle school levels and elementary level where you're at now, if there's any?
Honestly, it's the craziest things I realize is not much. It's not much. It's not much.
Okay, gotcha.
And it's really like once you know what you want from the student and how consistent you can be at pursuing what you want. For instance, since I do teach the behavior class, most people, I guess they see and they're like, all right, they must be incredibly scared, right? Like he got them in line because they are too scared to mess up. And I'm like, y'all have no idea how lazy I am to be able to fight a kid every day to get them to do it. So I have to learn quick. If I don't want to sit there and fight with you every day, I got to use a different approach. So I started to get to know them a little bit better and understand them, build relationships with them to where they can mess up, but they would rather me not know about it. Like, when you build that relationship, you just don't want to. You don't want to disappoint that person, and that's where it got.
Key.
Versus getting into trouble and not caring. How they had to be to even get to my class. And but again, some of that is, especially starting it off, because it's not like they come in and immediately they're okay because they saw me. They try me. All of them do it first. But a part of it is, one, making sure you shut it completely down when he first try it. Because I even tell people, I'm waiting. Like, he's been good for the last 3 weeks, but he has to try me so I can respond. And then he can see, all right, I'm not getting past that part physically at all. Mentally, no. So it's probably easier to simply just do what I need to do, right? So in a sense, I will use, the intimidation factor only to shut something down, but you can't use it to teach. You can't use it when it comes down to teaching a lesson. And even in the high school, that's a lot of the issues that we had. It's like they wanted us to punish and teach. You can't do both. You have to separate if you're going to be a consequence and let it serve for that purpose, simply a consequence. But if you actually want a lesson to be learned out of that, then you have to make sure you put just as much into teaching that lesson as you did into that consequence.
Agreed.
But as far as like just communication, like I said, once you know the bigger picture, like for me, it's once I know the bigger picture, I know how to communicate with you. And that makes a big difference in what you want, because again, you have teachers, like you said, with the mentality that their most important thing to do every day is command that respect or command that obedience, right? They don't. So a lot of teachers, you realize they don't really care how the class does as long as they do what they say. And you have to ask yourself, if my purpose is to actually support behaviors and teach them a different way, am I going to force obedience all day, every day? Is that teaching them anything? That might be getting them in line, that might get them to be quiet at the time that I need them to be quiet, but are they better people? Do they understand why they have to be quiet, or they're just doing it because they're scared of the guy that comes at you when you talk?
Yeah.
So, yeah, like I said, man, it's not that big of a difference, again, because when you approach whatever kid, no matter what age, there's a purpose of why you approach them. It's something that you want them to do. And as long as you stick to it, then you'll realize that, maybe the language, because of course the mind, right? Like you can't use certain vocabulary words to a high school kid that you can't, middle school, elementary. Just simply the past capacity to even interpret what you said.
Yep.
It's going to be different. So yeah, in the sense, that's the difference of what you can possibly say for them to understand. But the way you communicate, like for me, I shared this in a training once, that they talk about how you use your tone in a classroom, because classroom management is big, and that's a lot, and that's something that people take for granted. Especially like when you're looking at different candidates and stuff, and hiring processes. Like one of the main things you look for is, can you simply manage the classroom? Like you could be a great teacher, you can have all the knowledge in the world, but if you cannot manage the classroom, you're never going to be able to get that knowledge to those kids. So when we were speaking on classroom management and like attention getting, and I always let them know, I'm like, when I want to get them attention, I'm going to raise my voice. When I want to communicate, I'm going to lower it. That's how you determine my tone. So if you ever hear me get loud, I'm simply getting them to stop what they're doing.
Right.
I don't care what they're doing. If I get loud, it means to stop.
Yeah.
But then when I'm explaining why you have to stop, I got to come back down.
And keep it consistent at that.
So, when you communicate, whether it's high school or in the lower grade, your tone does matter.
Yeah.
Let's take it out of school. People, your tone matters when even just communicating with people, period. Yeah. And, just there's learning stuff like that, learning how people receive messages. I have to always learn how to differentiate, because number one, it's a special education class, and I have like so much of a variety of grade levels, like 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th, all in one class. So you have to be able to differentiate, like you were saying, looking for a specific candidate who can teach this or teach this kid as well as that kid, as well as that kid, because you're not going to get all the same type of kid in one class ever. Yeah. So if you don't know how to teach to different types of personalities, cultural backgrounds, all kinds of stuff, then you're not going to be as effective if you're going to a multicultural school or anything other than a private school, really, where you need all of the same type of kid. So, learning on the fly, and again, like admitting that no matter how long I do this, I still won't know everything.
Yeah.
And as long as however long I do this, I still won't be able to communicate perfectly to everyone. So you always have to have that open mentality to first get to know how they need to be communicated to, and then execute that.
And knowing sometimes, like, just having that reflection of like, maybe you don't know how to get to this type of person, right? You haven't learned that yet, right? And having the empathy to be able to have that conversation. How can I help this kid, right? Looking for someone to support you or get you to understand how. And I think from my personal experience too in education, even prior to that, I grew up in an environment where all the men and all the people around me had this presence, right, that wasn't themselves. It was like they were trying to protect themselves, this armor that I was saying, right? And for me, although, like I said, I tried not to be like my father, I ended up adapting it because it was something that was around me, right? My father had this presence that he felt he had to uphold, right, in public, because he didn't feel that he could be himself, right, truly, without feeling judged, right? And I think for me going into education, I addressed that I saw that immediately. I struggled with that the first couple years that I was in education, like having that, like I said earlier, having that armor up and not really being how I want, being me, basically, right? Because of the image of what an educator should get respect and should be tough, blah, blah, but I wasn't able to be me. As an educator, you need to find yourself. And I remember, I thank my wife all the time, and this is like what we're talking about, just having certain experiences. My wife had a whole different upbringing. She lived life, right? She had experiences from very young that were very different from me. I was very protected from certain experiences, but she was exposed to it much sooner. And she told me straight up, it was like, she told me this one time, and it changed everything when I went back into the classroom, and I took it right away. She was like, you're a man that looks like, you have this image and you're a man. You don't have to raise your voice.
Right.
People hear you. Your voice is, you have a deep tone to your voice naturally when you talk calm, right? And when you're calm, you actually seem like more like authoritative when you're calm, right? You don't have to raise your voice. You don't have to go down to their level. Right, it's more about knowing who's the adult in the room, right? And then when I heard that, just taking it back, and it's just working instantly. It's just like I was able to be myself because I wasn't holding myself to this certain level of like I have to, like, learning my tones, right? Like I have to be loud if they get loud. I have to show them who's the boss, right? It's more about, okay, he's having a moment, but I'm the adult. I can identify he's having a moment. How can I get him to calm down? Right? De-escalate, like you said earlier. And it came from me having that self-actualization. And someone, like you said, I think you said the important thing you said earlier, Tristan, where you have 4 or 5 people in your life that's willing to support you to bring in. My wife is definitely one of those people in my life. She still is, but she points out certain things and brings it to my awareness, and I'm able to be like, oh, okay. And then I add it. And we all need that as educators. I know going into education, you get a bunch of like deans of instruction and people that support you and evaluate you and all that. And they're trying to create that. And honestly, it can become frustrating at times because people are coming into your room, they're constantly giving you feedback, and some days you're just not for it, right? But get into this growth mindset, which you brought up earlier too, level of in your experience where like you want to take it in differently, right? You want to get better at this aspect, not just as an educator, but as a person. If you're able to take constructive feedback better from a evaluator, you're able to take constructive feedback from your spouse when you get home because that's gonna happen. You can get constructive feedback from a relative, right, that may annoy you the way they approach it, but you're able to look at the bigger picture, like Dre has said earlier, see the bigger picture when you're communicating with people. And I think once you're able to translate that, like if you're learning in education, because we're always growing, always learning, you're never going to be perfect as an educator. If you start connecting it, it becomes easier because you're able to like see the connection. Like kids, you're trying to make the connection with the students. You connect what's going on in the classroom with other teachers and administrators and students with what's going on at home, what's going on with your friends, what's going on with relatives and stuff like that.
Well, that's interesting because I have to like I don't say check somebody, but like make them realize like what they were doing, and I had to think about it too. Like kid cut up, you know, they're like, "Can you do me a favor? Can you come over and scare that kid?" And I'm like, "Let me ask you something." Let's say that kid, well, let's go back to how we were talking about the bias, right?
Yeah.
How, as a parent, you kind of have that, or as a teacher, you have that experience with that particular kid or particular teacher when you were in school. And then you grow up to be a teacher, and then you recognize that.
Yeah.
So I'm like, all right, well, if every single kid only knows me because they're scared, what are they going to grow up thinking? Black men are scary. Now, some of those kids are going to become cops. What's going to happen? They're going to remember that one big black teacher that had scared them that day, and they're going to use that, or not use it, but that's going to, you know, subconsciously become a part of their judgment when they come up.
Be teachers.
Or those kids will be teachers, so they're going to have another student my size, you know what I mean, or my complexion, or as intimidating looking as that. So it's like, do we really want to keep that cycle going? You know, like, do I? I'm like, nah. So I'm like, no, man, I'm not going to go scare that kid, but we can go talk to them and you can go tell them what they need to do.
When you had this interaction, did you break it down like that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I didn't break it down like that deep because one, I had to understand too that I don't think that teacher understood what she was doing when she asked me to do that. You know what I mean? So like, you know, I had to also like, you know, I don't want to make her feel bad like she did something racist or she did something, you know, discriminate. If that, you know, that may not have been her mentality when she asked. Now, yes, I had to explain why I wouldn't do that in, you know, to those kids, and as well as why it would be also taking away your power for when you want them to obey you or at least listen to you in a later time. But, you know, I did have to break down why I wouldn't just walk up and just scare a kid.
And I think that's what we need to prepare for too, because that right there became a teachable moment for you to have with that other teacher. And I think people don't think about that aspect in education when you're first starting out, where that, like you could have easily felt offended and then took it a different way, where that communication would have made that other teacher be like, oh, why he acting like that, and then find a different way and not truly understand. But you were able to make it a teachable moment for her, and to like address that and why you don't want to do that, right? And then show her how it's done properly, right? With an example, like you said, you went to go have the conversation with the student, which is key, that we don't even think about. Nobody told me that in college that was going to happen. You know what I mean? I was never told like there's going to be a teacher there's going to be your peers that are teaching with you that are going to piss you off on certain levels, like they just don't do things like without noticing, and you have to address it and you have to deal with it. Like that's not nothing we're trained to do. And you only learn that when you're in the trenches working as a teacher.
Learn it through conflict, like crucial conversations. Like I had never heard it phrased like that until I got to KIPP. But you know, the whole life is crucial conversations. It's like, hey, back up, or such and such is gonna happen. Like it's a conflict thing and not a problem solving thing, or not trying to get somebody to see the bigger picture or something. Like that's the bigger picture. Hey, I'm sure she was not thinking, hey, if I get this big black man to scare this kid, 20 years from now, that might have some long-standing effects. You know, like she's not thinking, she's thinking in the moment, I need this conflict resolved. Like, so such and such can happen. So I can say, hey, I managed my classroom. Not that I taught a kid or I uplifted a kid from one point to the next, but I need this handled right now. So can you do this for me? You're not thinking big picture like that. So yeah, that's just this a life skill, like just being able to have a crucial conversation with somebody like, hey, this is the bigger picture. You're not seeing the bigger picture. Let's solve this problem through like conflict resolution and not fear. Like fear doesn't work. You know that it doesn't.
You want to be respected, not feared, always. And I like to bring it back to how I started the show with the Kawhi Leonard effect. Like I look, and then I did my research on his life story, right? The way he lost his father very young, his mission, the things he had to endure, him going to a much smaller college, and what that does to a person when you're trying to make it to the levels he made it, right? He had a certain life experience that got him prepared to join the San Antonio Spurs and implement himself under all those mentors that had a lot of accomplishments, like Tim Duncan, who had one championship, Greg Popovich, which is one of the greatest coaches of all time. And then I even look it back, because there's something that always, me and my wife had this conversation the other day, because there's a lot of people that say, and I hear a lot of motivational speakers say, like, you have to learn through going through something bad, right? You just have, that's how you have to go through it, whatever. And I'm starting not to agree with that, like, because I believe a lot of what I've learned too was watching other people, right? And you can also learn from other people's mistakes. I've seen a lot of what my father did, and one of the last conversations I had with him was thanking him, right? He like seeing some of those things that he went through and he struggled with helped me see, like, okay, I see the effects of that happening, right? And he's trying to fight through it. Why would for me, I was like, I gotta take a different route, right? And then I had these conversations with him. But being able to get to that place of, like, you can learn from, like you said, you grew up being, watching people in your neighborhood, things in your surroundings, right? And learning from that. And that's how you build that that level of understanding, that experience as well, without like necessarily having to do bad things and mess up really bad, right? And I look back at Kawhi Leonard in 2013 when the San Antonio Spurs were in the finals. There's a little history. I'm a basketball historian for those who are watching. In 2013, the Miami Heat, when LeBron James, Dwayne Wade, and Chris Bosh joined together, the third time going to the finals, the second championship they won against the San Antonio Spurs. I remember, and I connected very vividly because Manu Ginobili was Kawhi Leonard's teammate, and he had they were winning the game. It was game 6. They had the game won. And I think he missed some crucial free throws, right?
Both of them missed free throws.
They missed free throws, right? But I remember the one they blamed mainly was Ginobili, because he had this play at the end that he slipped up, right? And I look at that, connecting the dots, like he had seen that. He's seen his mentors fail. So in those big moments, that led him to go win the championship the next year in 2014 against LeBron and win the Finals MVP. In Toronto, to see that those difficult times and have that experience of seeing other people mess up and how they approach it, because Ginobili and Tim Duncan came back the next year stronger, right? That kind of like built him to have the Kawhi Leonard effect, where he goes to team and he's able to easily jump in, how you were able to jump into education from your experiences, being a father, having experience working in a different field, working with people, interacting with people, led you to have this seamlessly transition into education, right? And I think people are not talking about that, right? The Kawhi Leonard effect is built through experience, whether you get it early, unconsciously, like you're just put in a circumstance and you learn, or you go through life and you start seeing it later on, right? And build yourself up, whether you're in education and learn it. But I think we need to have these conversations for educators. And this is why I think this is important to have this podcast, episode 7, because I'm actually, the other day I was presenting my curriculum to HISD, right? And these are the type of things I'm bringing up. Like, how can this impact? I made a curriculum in restorative practices, how to implement it into the classrooms. And Tristan was actually one of the teachers that helped me with the curriculum, how to frame it, how to put it in the format and align it to TEKS, ELA TEKS and standards, for those who don't know, so that it could be implemented into ELA classes. And it was started out with students, but then now I'm switching it to teachers, right? This is a program that can build these relationships. Lesson plans are lined out, but it brings awareness to what you're dealing with outside of the classroom, right? You having these and you probably felt it too, because when I had my circles, and we had circle every day with my students, and we talked about some serious deep stuff. I know I felt it. I know you probably felt it. Like, it may, after I left those circles and I hear these vulnerable stories of these students and they going through it and things they're dealing with, and they're asking me for advice, they're asking you for advice. I'm taking that home and I'm like, how do I walk the walk, right? I can't just be like doing this and being the person giving them advice, and then I switch it all up when I'm dealing with my wife, when I'm dealing with my child, right? And then building that, whether you have had certain experiences or not, it's necessary. And that's what I'm trying to bring with my curriculum, so that the Kawhi Leonard effect can start happening.
So is it more like, would you say like it's exposure might be more important or more powerful?
Agreed.
1,000%.
Yeah, like necessarily like experience, but exposure to
Exposure.
it.
Yeah.
I think content, like I said, content knowledge and even like the most basic classroom management will get you to, 3 years, what I'm saying, in the profession. But if you're talking about like transforming lives and like actually taking it somewhere and like being like a vessel for people in the long term, then life exposure helps with that, because kids are going to come to you about everything. Teachers are going to come to you about everything. I have new teachers every year just come by like, hey, can I come by your classroom? Like, I just need to see something. I need to see a good classroom because such and such is not going well in mine. And you gotta have something for them. And that's the thing with teaching. Like, man, you gotta have something for these kids, man. You gotta have something like, hey, I had a student who, was temporarily living with her boyfriend's family. Boyfriend was abusing her. You're like, okay, where do we go from here? Like, what do I have for her in that moment?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, I've seen all kind of different situations. Like, that exposure, me being able to sit down with her for like an hour and be like, hey, the first thing, not telling her, hey, yeah, you need to get out of that house, you need to get out of that situation. The first thing I told her was, hey, this is not your fault. Like, this dude he's putting his hands on you, such and such, it's not your fault. You know what I'm saying? And you deserve better than that. You know, like, those are the kind of messages we have to communicate to kids, and not just think like every situation is just like 2 + 2 4. Hey, leave, everything will be all right. No, it's a mental thing that we got to deal with them. Like, they're dealing with like so many things on a daily basis, like just feeling like they're not good enough, feeling like they're not smart enough, feeling like there's not a lot of options. And we have to, you know, realistically, but like, hey, let them know, yeah, you are good enough.
And honestly, you said this earlier, you alluded to this, they're not getting consistency in other places, right? They probably going to environments where they're not getting consistency on a daily basis.
I mean, who is?
Yeah.
You think about it like that, who is? Like,
Yeah.
how many areas in your life are just super consistent?
Yeah.
It's not many.
Honestly, like, it's crazy, but you got to think about it. Some of them do have consistency. It's just in a negative way.
That's a
Like,
good
when
way
they
to put
go home,
Yeah,
they see
yeah.
consistent negativity. They see consistent crime, or they see consistent poverty.
Yeah.
So, and they show that
That's a good point.
when they get to school and they show their behavior. So I think a lot of people see consistency. It's where do we want that consistency to be?
That's a
Like,
good
we
point.
want them to see like that consistency that leads them into a positive direction.
Yeah.
But if they come into us already broken, or like you were saying, like she was getting abused, well, she gets consistency got abused to the point where she didn't even think that it was abuse. She just thought that was a way of life, most likely.
It's annoying.
You know what I mean? So it's like consistency does show up in lives, and that's what steers us the way we go. But I think we just have to catch it. We got to find that consistency and try to help
Address it.
people identify where it is and see if we can shift them to find some consistency
That's key.
in a more positive direction.
That's key. And I think my mission now, doing what I did at KIP, and you've seen it firsthand, I just thought that needed to be in more spaces. Right? What I did at KIP, I saw the impact that I had on those kids. I'm still in communication with those kids, right? And some of the kids that weren't in that class that I mentored, right? And I saw the impact that it can have. And I see teachers all the time, like, worried about how do I build these relationships? Like, they're good teachers, but necessarily they don't have that relationship piece. They don't have the kids being like, oh my God, I want to go talk to that teacher, blah, blah, blah. And it's because they're not diving in, to be honest. And I think, like, fully diving in, like we said, making the translation from the classroom to your own life, connecting the dots, right? And what I'm trying to, with my curriculum and my program, and when I go to schools, and I'm doing one in November where I'm going to a high school in New York City, I'm doing a training with teachers, and that's going to be my conversation with them, right? Like, how can we connect it for you? Right? And like, how can we dive in? You're here already. No matter how you got here, your job gets easier when you dive in, right? You start walking the walk, on campus, off campus, and you start making it more like, we're trying to tell these kids to connect the dots, but most of the educators are not connecting the dots for themselves, and that's why they find in trouble with it.
Can't look at kids as means to an end.
Yeah.
Like, this is a 7:45 to 3:45, 4:15 thing, or this is a August to December, January to June type thing.
Lifestyle.
Yeah, this is like, like, these kids will attach themselves to you, and they won't let go. You know what I'm saying? If they feel that you talked about empathy, and that's what it is. So before I grew this beard, this struggly beard, like, I look way younger than whatever I look like now. And I would notice that, especially when I was new to a school, I would walk down the halls, and other teachers who had seen me, you know, many times before, they would look at me, and it was like they wouldn't say anything until they recognized that I was a teacher. And that rubbed me the wrong way. And I would always talk to kids about that, because we were reading Invisible Man. So I was just talking, like, what are some experiences where you felt like you were invisible? I'm like, myself personally, at this very school, amongst the same teachers that y'all see on a daily basis, there are times where I feel invisible because they think that I'm y'all. And there's a barrier between the teachers and students, the ones who don't have that full empathy. I mean, like I walk through the hallway all day, I talk to at least 200 people. I'll stop. Hey, how's the day going? Yeah. Joke, whatever, like anything that like shows that connection, shows that I see you. You're a real person and not just somebody I see in this classroom from whatever 15 of whatever 45. Like I'm seeing you, like you're a part of my day, just like I'm a big part of your day. We're in this together. You know what I'm saying? Like you're not a means to an end. If you can't build that sympathy and, like you say, dive into those relationships, then you'll never have those relationships, and this work will never be fully meaningful for you.
Exactly. And I think also, like I had a relationship with one of my mentees, right? I came in and he had a lot of things going on in his life outside of school, trauma that he hasn't dealt with, right? And me truly understanding that I don't need to have the answers right now, right? And that being a part of the process. Like I remember starting out and seeing a lot of educators, like I said earlier, having this savior complex. Like I have to help. I'm here to help. I'm here to make a difference. And I think that's not the right approach. You should never go in trying to do that, right? The mission should be, I want to be there, right? I want to be there with them, like literally. And I got to a point where I'm still in communication with the student, right? And he's already finished, he left high school already and all that. And I'm still in communication. And it's the consistency, like we said at the beginning, the persistence. It's not about like understanding that he probably won't get it now, but being able to listen, understand where he's coming from without judgment, and then being able to give him the information that he needs, whether he picks it up now or 5 years down the line. That's a part of the process. And we can't, I think this whole society that we're in, we're so focused on becoming this rewarded teacher, like this accomplished teacher, like this level of teaching where you get this respect from everybody, that we're losing the true mission of education, right? And that's what makes it very difficult. Everybody's trying to get these merits, right? By trying to have that savior complex. The only way you get a merit, where you get this ABC clip, right? Or this news clip about you on the news, or this award, is by doing this extra stuff that out of the ordinary, going to a certain area and doing this special work that nobody else is doing.
Extrinsic reward.
Yeah, and not doing it organically. And for me, I learned this with the student, where it wasn't necessarily giving him the advice. Sometimes it was just sitting there with him. Right. And honestly, that was something I was struggling with my wife. Like just understanding, like for me, I try to be solution oriented, right? And sometimes I just act, and that ends up making me not solution oriented. It just, when I hear a problem, I want to fix it, right? And I just want to give an answer, and that's not what needed in the moment. That's just, especially if it's not strategically planned out, you just going off of emotion. And I learned that, and that actually, being able to sit with my student and hear him out and not give him judgment and just be there with him, allowed me to be a better father and a husband.
I had a student once who was going through some things with some boy or whatever, and like it really like crushed her. I had it like the first period of the day. Yeah. And this is like my second year teaching. And she came in, we would always joke together. She came in, she didn't say a word to nobody, like period. So she sat there, everybody was trying to like, what's wrong? She didn't say nothing. She came and like sat behind my desk. I had like this really long desk, and she just sat and she just stayed. And she stayed there for about a good 5 periods. She wouldn't talk, so I couldn't get her to leave and like go to a class period or whatever. So I'm writing notes to all these other teachers, whatever, like, hey, she's going through some stuff, whatever. She was in there for about a good 6 straight hours. Yeah. And then like finally I was like, hey, you want something to eat? like I got her some food from Chick-fil-A, whatever, and like then she finally like just broke down and told me everything that was going on, whatever. But like that's like you're not gonna get a teacher award for that. Yeah. Just sitting there and not saying a damn thing, just waiting for the kid to open up. You're not getting an award for that. Nothing extrinsic is coming from that. Like it's just like a empathy. Like I just wanted her to, I want to make sure she wasn't like depressed or nothing like that. Like, hey, don't kill yourself in my class. Like, do that somewhere else. You know, like, but those are things. Those are like the small things that people don't write about. It's just like from that I was able to like teach her better because she know that I got her back. You know what I'm saying? I'm here to listen. Yeah. If nothing else, like I'm not here to fix whatever's going on because I probably can't. You know what I'm saying? But I'm just here to listen. So like we keep talking about like what makes a good educator. It's like all these, the empathy, the life exposure, like all these things, they all go together. Like you can't do one without the other.
And I think to connect the dot too, from what we were talking earlier and what you just said, it's about just making them feel one seen, and then also like you're there with them, right? As in like you're not trying to be liked, but you're not perfect. You can see what they're going through and then show them hope by you being who you are, not giving them not saying the right thing at the right time or saying anything. Is that when the time comes, you would show over time that this is an evolution process that you can get through too, right? They can learn your story by you just acting, and they learn along the way, and nobody's gonna see that. And honestly, I think the biggest reward is having those relationships. And if you really want to have those relationships, is being able kind of, with that confidence we said earlier, and I know all three of us experienced this at one time, you have to let go of even like, okay, the evaluator's coming in. I need to stop thinking about how to do the perfect lesson or do this, just be me. And then when you are you end up having a smoother class, and then you end up getting those grades and those accolades or whatever. It'll come when you are organically you. But if you never get to be you, it will never happen for you. You know what I mean? So I appreciate you, Tristan, for coming down to do this podcast. I know there's a hike for everybody. You travel like about 45 minutes to get here.
Man,
so
from Southwest Houston to Katy, which is a good 45 minutes. Now I got to make this good hour trip to Pearland.
Yes,
you know,
yes. So for those people, for those people that are on different coasts that watch the show, I know we got a bunch of people in New York. That is like traveling from New York City to Long Island, or you know what I mean, in the worst traffic areas, right? It takes about an hour or something. But I appreciate you for coming. I think this was a great podcast. Bring you guys topics that are necessary, and then we can build on conversations. Appreciate you, Dre, for opening up. And before we go, if you could tell them where to find you and where you're at, and
you could probably find me at Kip Houston High School. That's where I am. A good.
Your Instagram and all that.
Instagram at T Jones TEEDOTJONES _ Facebook Tristan Jones. Man, I don't do much, man. I just read and watch basketball, man. That's life for me, man. But yeah, you find me those places, man. I don't know, man. That's it.
Cool. Well, I appreciate you. Thank you. And I'll see y'all next episode.
Yeah.